All right, let's see what he's doing in the gymnasium today. Thankfully, the door was unlocked. What is he doing? Hey, Rocky! What are you,
Sonia?
Hi, what are you doing?
I'm getting into shape to do some boxing. You know, there hasn't been any sports for a long time, and they're starting a new boxing league, and they're gonna have a geezer weight, so I'm gonna join.
A geezer weight?
Yeah, you gotta be 65 years and older and out of shape, so I fit right in.
You are too funny. Have you ever boxed before?
Yeah, I used to box some in high school, and then later on, I used to spar with Mike Tyson.
Mike Tyson?
Oh yeah, man. One time I had him scared to death.
You had Mike Tyson scared to death. I just don't believe it.
Yeah, he thought he killed me, so. But anyway, I just got into this boxing mood because, you know, I'm reading about Elijah today and the Battle of the Gods. Oh, I can't wait to get into it. So let's get started.
All right, I think the chroniclers will want to start.
Okay.
So come on over. Get in your position. Maybe I should say in your corner.
In this corner, weighing in at blip, 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 blip.
He has to disrobe here.
Well, anyway, like I said, I've been reading about Elijah and what we're going to be talking about tonight in the Battle of the Gods. And God's methods invariably involve a person. And the question that we want to think about is, what kind of person does God choose and use? Now, God's choice of someone to work with is diametrically opposite than what man would choose to work with. We learned this in Sunday school when Israel was looking for a king, but that's a story for another time. Usually man chooses an individual based on what he is. You know, when a church is looking for a pastor, they want to look at him as far as what he is and what he has done. And the same thing with just about any job. You know, you put your resume out there. But God chooses an individual on the basis of what he is to become. And that's an interesting thought. Because so many times we sit around and think, well, God can't use me because I'm not this and I'm not that. And God wants to use you, and he will make you what he wants you to be. And we see that in Elijah. Because the last time we saw Elijah and he was sitting by a drying brook, becoming. And God was ministering to him, and now God is prepared to minister through him. Now, like I said, reading about this in 1 Kings chapter 18, it is probably one of the most exciting scenes in Scripture. And this contest is on Mount Carmel. And you have two explosive personalities that are going toe to toe. And they collide with each other. And the moment they do, the sparks begin to fly. 1 Kings chapter 18 and verse number 17 says that Ahab says, when he saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is this you, you troubler of Israel?" What an indictment. Elijah, all of this problem we're having is because of you and your prayers. And Elijah, man, he's up to the task, and he looks Ahab in the eye, and just like the prophet Nathan with David, he points his finger and he says, "Hey buddy, you're the problem here. You're the one that's causing all of the problem in Israel." And so he goes on and he lays out Ahab's sin of how he led people after false gods, and he married a priestess named Jezebel who brought in Baal worship into the nation of Israel. And so in doing all of this, Ahab gives out the challenge. He throws out the gauntlet. Well, we know who's in charge of this thing here. Because 7 times Elijah takes the initiative and issues the commands. And as I said, so since we haven't had any sports for a while, let me invite you to the Battle of the Gods! Ding, 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 ding. Now this is a big event. It's like the July 4th. Everybody's off work. Probably haven't bathed because there's been no water for a while. And they're all making a picnic up on Mount Carmel, and they're coming from all over the place. And you see Mount Carmel with its beautiful views of the Mediterranean Sea out there. They're all seated around. And it's winner take all. 15 rounds, no holds barred. And it's really a scene of contrast. On one side, we have 850 prophets. 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Ashtaroth, prophets of the grove. And man, they are all decked out in their finest. I mean, they are sweet looking. And you know, their clothes are made of a material kind of silky that reflects on the sun. And they've got this big metal around their neck that captures the rays of the sun and then reflects it all out. They do this because, after all, Baal is the sun god. And so they want to reflect him. And pretty soon the group separates, and here comes Ahab. And he's also in his finest. Like I said, it's a holiday. It's a boxing match. It's bigger than Vegas. And they bring him up, and his servants carry him up on his litter, and they set him off and put him on the throne that they've hauled up to the top of Mount Carmel for him to sit there. And then we look over on the other side, and there stands one lone, gaunt man. He's crudely clothed. He's coarse in his appearance. His hair is all disheveled, but he has eyes like steel. And we hear somebody in the crowd say, "Oh man, this isn't going to be a fight at all. What a shame. What's this poor mope doing up here? What's he gonna do? How's he gonna fight all of these people? This is no contest." But listen, my friend, don't feel sorry for Elijah, because Elijah doesn't feel sorry for himself. Now, in 1 Kings chapter 18, verses 21 to 40, Elijah makes 7 statements that shows who's really in charge. And we're going to look at 3 of them tonight. And these will give us something to think about, and then we'll finish up in a week or so with some principles that we learned from this situation. Now, you might want to take your Bible and you might want to underline these statements, because these statements really unpack the story that we're talking about here. And the first statement is in verse number 21. And Elijah steps up to the center of the ring, and he looks at all of the crowd that is there, and he says this: "How long will you hesitate between 2 opinions?" Man, you talk about throwing the first punch. Elijah throws the first punch, and he throws it at the people that are there about their sin of indecisiveness. And basically what he's telling them is, hey, you're at a fork in the road, and you are going to have to make a decision. You have been straddling the fence too long, and there is no room for any peaceful coexistence. It's either Jehovah or it's Baal. Make the choice. And the silence is deafening. Ever feel that way? We live in a world that has a lot of attractions and a lot of pretty trinkets that catch our eye and draw us away. And we somehow get the idea that we can serve God and serve the world. And you can't. Jesus said it this way: no man can serve two masters, because he's either going to love one and hate the other, or cling to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God in this world system. How long are you going to hesitate about who you're going to serve? Statement number 2, we find in verses 22 through 24. And Elijah says, I alone am left a prophet of the Lord. And then he tells them what he's going to do. And then he looks over at the prophets of Baal and he says, then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord, and God, the God who answers by fire, he is God. Now, Baal was the chief deity in the Canaanite pantheon. They had many gods. And he was considered the Lord of heaven, the sun god. And so whenever it would thunder and lightning, they would say, ooh, that's Baal. Ooh, that's Baal. He's the Lord of fire. He starts fire with his lightning. So if there ever was anything that a god of fire should be able to do, would be to light a fire. And at the end of that passage, it says, and all the people said, good idea. In fact, the Baal prophets really thought Elijah was a dope. Because they said, yes, sir, we'll do it. This sounds like a fair contest. They thought it was decidedly in their favor and to their advantage. And they agree. Now, so many times we let the world intimidate us, right? We think, we say we believe in God, that God can do anything, that we can trust him. And then the world comes along and it intimidates us by saying, no, you can't believe that. We're better. Look how big we are. Look how strong we are. Look how many people we have and how few followers Jesus has. Number 3 statement. Elijah basically tells them, go first. He says, choose one ox for yourselves and prepare it first, and call on the name of your God, but put no fire under it. And so they start out, these 450 prophets of Baal, and all morning long, they're calling out to Baal, and they're dancing, and they're swaying, and they're chanting, and they're saying, come on, Baal, answer with fire. But at the end of verse number 26, Scripture tells us, but there was no voice and no one answered. But as believers, this really shouldn't surprise us. Because the world wants to put on a power play to let us know or let us think how powerful they are, when they're really not that powerful at all compared to our God, who is the only God. Let me read to you from Psalms, just to give you a better idea. Psalm 115, verse 2, it said, why should the nations say, where now is their God? But our God is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the work of man's hands. They have mouths, but they cannot speak. They have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. They have noses, but they cannot smell. They have hands, but they cannot feel. And they have feet, but they cannot walk. They cannot make a sound with their throat. Those who make them will become like them, everyone who trusts in them. The psalmist basically said their God is a big dummy, and if you follow their God, you're a big dummy too. Well, now the prophets of Baal are really upset, and so they start jumping up on the altar, and they're screaming out, and they start taking knives, and they start cutting themselves, and I mean, they're just perplexed. What's happening? What's not happening? Now, Scripture says it's noon. It's the apex of the sun shining down on top of the mountain. It shouldn't be any problem to start a little fire. Scripture says it came about noon that Elijah mocked them. And he said with a loud voice, "Call out with a loud voice, for he is a god. Either he is occupied or gone aside or is on a journey, or perhaps he is asleep and needs to be awakened." I like Elijah. He has the same spiritual gift that I have, sarcasm. And man, he is just ripping on these people. Hey, he's on a journey. That word journey is an interesting word. It means he's going out hunting. A god that needs to hunt for his food? Huh. He says, or he's occupied. That's another interesting use of the Hebrew word. It means that he's in the men's room. Maybe he's gone aside, maybe he's working on something, or perhaps he is asleep and he needs to be awakened. Now listen, my friends. Take note of this. If sincerity is what saves a person, then these people should have been saved. Because they were sincere. But they were sincerely wrong. You see, they might have had great faith, but the object of their faith was no good. And faith is always determined by its object. Let me give you an example. Say I came in one day and Miss Sonia's here and she's typing away and I say, "Miss Sonia, I got to go to Dallas. Do you know where it is?" Well, not really. I go, "Well, it's a little bit south and it's a little bit west." And she goes, yeah, I kind of know where it is over there. And I said, "Hey, you know what? I've rented a plane. Will you fly me?" Yeah, oh, Sonia, I know you can do it. And we go out to DePage County Airport and we go through the hangar and I say, "Oh, by the way, I forgot to ask you, Sonia, have you ever flown a plane before?" "No." "Oh, that's okay. You just got to believe. And I believe that you can do it." My friend, that's not faith. That's foolishness. Foolishness. You see, faith has to have the right object in order for it to be right faith. Now, I like what the end of verse 29 says. "But there was no voice. No one answered." And I like this. "And no one paid attention." Even the crowd was getting bored with the antics because nothing was happening. Real quick, gonna close out with 3 questions I want you to think about this week. Question number 1. What side of the fence are you on? What side of the fence are you going to come down on? How long are you going to hesitate between 2 opinions? Are you going to serve God completely with your whole self, or are you going to serve the world? You can't do both. Question number 2. How much do you trust God? Do you really believe that God is your helper and your source of strength? Elijah was one man against 850, but he trusted that God would see him through. Third of all, What is the object of your faith? Who are you really putting your trust into? We know the Bible tells us without faith it's impossible to please God. We know that by grace are ye saved through faith. We're told that whatsoever is not of faith is sin. The Bible is just loaded with verses and people who were people of faith, and they had the right object. What is the object of your faith? Let's pray. Thank you, Father, for this exciting story in Scripture. And yet, Lord, it has a point that we need to determine if God is God, we will serve him. We need to understand that we can trust you completely, and we need to know that our faith must be in the right person, and that person is Jesus Christ. We ask these things in his name. Amen. Well, thanks for listening to Quarantine Chronicles. I got to get back and get ready for getting in shape for the Geezer League. And I can't tell you exactly what station it's going to be on, but it's probably going to be pay-per-view. So you can help me out by subscribing, and let's go get them.